They didn't whisper it. They didn't even lower their voices. Dead weight. That's what they called me, in my own house. And the worst part, they laughed after saying it like it was a joke. Like I was just something in the background. Something that existed but didn't matter, that I was standing right there in the hallway, holding a basket of laundry, listening, frozen. Because in that moment, something inside me didn't just hurt, it woke up. Have you ever had a moment like that? A moment where everything suddenly becomes clear. Not slowly, not gently, but all at once. Like a glass shattering inside your chest. That was me, because for years, I had been living in a story I kept telling myself to survive. They don't mean it. They're just stressed. It's family, it's normal. I made excuses for disrespect, that I covered up neglect with love, that I turned silence into understanding, and slowly, piece by piece, I disappeared. Not physically, that I was still there every day. Cooking meals no one thanked me for. Cleaning rooms that were messed up again within hours. Paying bills that no one even knew existed, holding everything together, while being treated like I was nothing. Tell me something, how long can a person keep giving before they forget what it feels like to receive? Because that's what happened to me. I forgot what respect felt like, I forgot what appreciation sounded like, I forgot what it meant to be valued. And when you forget those things, you start accepting anything, even disrespect, even being called dead weight. That night, I didn't react, I didn't walk in and confront them, I didn't cry, I didn't shout, I just stood there and listened, because sometimes silence shows you more than confrontation ever will. And what I heard next, it didn't just hurt me, it confirmed everything. She doesn't do anything. We take care of everything anyway. She just sits around. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, but because of how far from the truth it was, because the truth was, I was the one paying the mortgage, I was the one covering the bills, I was the one making sure that house even existed. But they didn't know that, or maybe they never cared to know. And that realization, it hits differently, because it makes you question everything, not just them but yourself. How did I let it get this far? When did I become invisible? Why did I stay silent for so long? Those questions, they don't come with easy answers, but they do something powerful. They wake you up, and once you're awake, you can't go back to sleep. I slowly walked back to my room, closed the door quietly, and sat on the edge of my bed. The same bed I had slept in for years. The same room that had witnessed my entire journey, my sacrifices, my patience, my love. And for the first time, I looked at it differently. Not as my space, but as a place I had outgrown. Because growth, it doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it feels like loss. Sometimes it feels like loneliness, sometimes it feels like everything is falling apart. But in reality, everything is falling into place. I sat there for a long time thinking. Not emotionally, but clearly, because clarity doesn't come from chaos. It comes from stillness, and in that stillness, I saw everything. Every moment I stayed quiet when I should have spoken. Every time I gave more, hoping it would be enough. Every time I ignored my own feelings to keep the peace. And I realized something that changed everything. I didn't just end up in this situation. I built it. Not intentionally, but through patterns, through silence, through overgiving. And that realization, it's not easy, because it means taking responsibility, but it also means something else, power, because if you created the pattern, you can break it. And that night, I made a decision. A real one. Not emotional, not temporary, but deep, final. I'm done. Done being invisible. Done being unappreciated, done being dead weight in a house I carried for years, because let me tell you something. No one who gives everything is ever dead weight. They're the backbone, the foundation, the reason things even work. And I was that person. But I had been acting like I wasn't. And that was about to change. The next morning I woke up before everyone. The house was silent, calm, peaceful, almost like nothing had happened. But everything had changed. Inside me. I walked into the kitchen, made my coffee, sat at the table, and for the first time in years, I didn't think about what I needed to do for them. I thought about what I needed to do for me. And that's where everything begins. Not outside, inside. I went to my room, opened a drawer, and pulled out something they had never seen before. The truth. In the form of papers, bills, mortgage documents, receipts, proof of everything I had been doing quietly for years. Everything they ignored. Everything they assumed would just handle itself, and I laid it all out on the table, one by one. Carefully, not in anger, not in revenge, but in clarity. Because this wasn't about hurting them. It was about showing them reality. And, more importantly, it was about showing myself that I had power. Days passed. And I moved differently. I stopped doing extra things, stopped overextending myself, stopped trying to earn appreciation, because here's the truth: you don't earn respect by giving more. You earn respect by knowing your worth and acting accordingly. And when you change like that, people notice. They may not understand it, but they feel it. The energy shifts. The dynamic changes. And suddenly, you're not as easy to ignore anymore. But this wasn't about getting their attention. This was about getting mine back. Because I had lost myself trying to be everything for everyone else. And now I was coming back. Slowly, powerfully, unapologetically. And what I was about to do next, it wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was strong enough to change everything in that house. Forever. So if you're still listening right now, I want you to ask yourself something. Be honest. Where in your life are you being taken for granted? Where are you giving too much and receiving nothing in return? Where are you staying silent even though deep down you know something isn't right? Because this story, it's not just about me. It's about you too, your life, your choices, your value. And maybe this is your moment, your wake-up call, your turning point. So don't go anywhere. Because in the next part, when I place those papers on the table, when the truth finally comes out, when everything shifts, you're going to see exactly what happens when someone who has been silent for years finally decides to choose themselves. I didn't say anything that morning. Not yet. Because timing matters, and when you've been silent for years, you don't break it with noise. You break it with precision. I sat at the table with my coffee, watching the sunlight slowly fill the room. Everything looked normal, too normal, like nothing had changed, but inside me, everything was different. Because once you see your worth clearly, you can't go back to pretending you don't. I heard footsteps, voices, doors opening. The house was waking up. Just like every other day, same routine. Same energy, same people, who had no idea that this was the day everything would shift. One of them walked into the kitchen, didn't look at me, didn't greet me, just opened the fridge, grabbed something and walked away like I wasn't even there. And you know what? For the first time, it didn't hurt. It confirmed. Because when people show you who you are to them, believe it. Don't fight it. Don't explain it. Don't try to change it. Just see it clearly. Another one came in. Same thing. No acknowledgement. No appreciation. Nothing. And I just sat there calm, observing, because this wasn't new. This was just the first time. I wasn't ignoring it. That's the difference. Awareness. It changes everything. You stop reacting emotionally and start seeing patterns. And once you see patterns, you stop making excuses. I finished my coffee, stood up, walked back to my room, and looked at the papers again, the mortgage, the bills, every single payment I had made over the years. Quietly. Consistently, without recognition. And I thought to myself, they really believe I do nothing. That thought didn't make me angry. It made me certain, because certainty, it removes hesitation, and hesitation, it's what keeps people stuck. I gathered everything neatly, put it in a clean envelope, and held it in my hands for a moment, because this wasn't just paper. This was truth. This was reality. This was everything they never bothered to see, and today, they were going to see it. Whether they were ready or not. The day went on like usual. I moved through it quietly. No extra effort. No overgiving. Just presence. And that alone felt different. Because when you stop overextending yourself, you start conserving your energy. And that energy, it builds strength, confidence, clarity. Evening came. Everyone gathered in the living room. Phones in hand. TV playing, laughter here and there. Comfortable. Unaware. And I watched them. Not with anger. Not with resentment, but with understanding. Because now I knew exactly where I stood. And when you know where you stand, you stop trying to stand somewhere else. I walked into the room slowly, calmly, holding the envelope. They glanced at me, briefly. Then went back to whatever they were doing. That used to hurt. Being ignored like that. But now it gave me power. Because I wasn't there for their attention anymore. I was there for truth. Can we talk for a minute? I said. My voice was steady, clear, different. And they felt it. You could see it. They looked up, confused, slightly curious, because something in my tone wasn't familiar. What is it? One of them asked. I didn't answer right away. I walked to the center table, placed the envelope down right in front of them and said, "Open it." They exchanged looks, picked it up, opened it. And as they started going through the papers, everything changed. You could see it on their faces. Confusion, then focus, then realization. What is this? Someone asked, and I answered simply. That's the house. They looked at me, now fully paying attention. That's the mortgage, the bills, the payments. I paused. Let it sink in because truth needs space. I've been paying all of it, I continued. For years. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Because this wasn't something they expected. Not from me. Not in this way. You said I do nothing, I added calmly. So I thought it was time you saw everything I've been doing. No anger, no accusation, just facts, and facts, they don't argue, they land deep. You never told us, one of them said. And for a moment, I almost smiled because that response, it revealed everything. I didn't need to tell you, I replied. You could have asked. Silence again, different this time because now they were thinking, not about me, but about themselves, and that's when things start to shift, when people are forced to face something they've been ignoring. I've been carrying this house, I continued. Financially, emotionally, in every way. I paused. Not to be dramatic, but to be clear. And I won't be doing that anymore. That sentence, it hit differently because it wasn't just information. It was a boundary that a line. A change. What do you mean? Someone asked. And this time my answer was simple. I mean, from now on you contribute. The room went quiet. Not just silent but heavy, because that one sentence, it changed the entire dynamic. No more assumptions, no more comfort, no more taking things for granted. Or what? Another voice said. And that question, it used to scare me. That tone, that challenge, but not anymore, because fear only controls you when you don't know your worth, and now, I knew exactly who I was. Or I leave, I said calmly. No hesitation, no emotion. Just truth. And that's when everything stopped. Because they realized. This wasn't a conversation. This was a decision, and decisions, they don't need approval. They need action. You're serious? They asked, and I nodded. Yes. Silence. Deep. Uncomfortable. Real, because for the first time they were seeing me differently, not as someone who would stay no matter what. Not as someone who would keep giving endlessly, but as someone who had limits, who had boundaries, who had finally chosen herself. And that realization, it changes everything. The room felt different. The energy shifted because power had shifted. Not loudly, not aggressively, but clearly. And I stood there, calm, grounded, certain, because once you take your power back, you don't give it away again. Not for comfort. Not for familiarity, not for anyone. I'll give you time to think, I said. And then I turned around and walked away. No argument, no back and forth, because I wasn't there to convince them. I was there to inform them. And that's the difference. When you're unsure, you explain. When you're certain, you state. And I had stated everything. That night, I didn't overthink. I didn't replay the conversation. I didn't question myself. Because doubt, it disappears when clarity is strong. I went to sleep peacefully, and that alone was new because for years my mind was always full, always worried, always thinking about others, but now, it was quiet, still, free. And that's when I realized something powerful. Peace doesn't come from fixing others. It comes from choosing yourself. The next morning, everything felt different. Not because they had changed, but because I had, and that's where real change begins. Inside you. Not around you. So if you're still listening, I want you to understand something. There will come a moment in your life when you'll have to speak. Not loudly, not emotionally, but clearly. And that moment, it will define everything that comes after it. So don't run from it, don't delay it, don't ignore it. Because your life is waiting on the other side of that decision, and trust me, what happened next, what they did after that night, and what I chose to do after their response, it changed everything. Forever. So stay with me. Because in the next part, you're going to see what happens when reality hits people who never expected it, and how one decision can completely transform your life. That night after the conversation, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Not peaceful, just heavy. Like something had shifted in the air and no one knew how to breathe the same anymore. I could feel it. From the way doors closed a little harder, from the way voices dropped when I walked by, from the way no one met my eyes. And for the first time, I didn't chase that silence. I didn't try to fix it. I didn't try to make things normal again, because normal was the problem. Normal was where I was invisible. Normal was where I gave everything and received nothing. So I let the silence stay because sometimes silence is necessary. It forces truth to surface. It forces people to sit with reality. And that's exactly what was happening. The next morning, I woke up before everyone again. Not because I had to, but because my mind was clear. No overthinking. No anxiety, just focus. And when your mind is like that, you don't feel heavy. You feel ready. I walked into the kitchen, made my coffee, sat down in the same chair. But I wasn't the same person anymore, because now I knew my value. And once you know your value, you move differently, you speak differently, you think differently, you don't shrink to fit into places that don't respect you. You expand beyond them. I heard footsteps again. One of them walked in. This time, they looked at me briefly, awkwardly, like they didn't know how to act anymore. Morning, they said. It was forced, uncomfortable. But I noticed it. Because that one word, it was more than I had received in years. And it didn't make me happy. It made me aware. Because respect that only shows up when you change your behavior is not real respect. It's reaction. And I wasn't looking for reaction anymore. I was looking for alignment. Another one walked in, same energy, same awkwardness. And I could see it clearly now. They were thinking, processing, realizing. Because when you take something away, people finally notice its value. And I had taken something away. My silence. My overgiving. My constant presence. And now they felt the difference. But here's the truth. I didn't do it for them. I did it for me, because real change, it's not about teaching others a lesson. It's about freeing yourself. The day went on slowly. No one brought up the conversation. No one mentioned the envelope. But I could feel it in the tension, in the distance, in the unspoken words, because sometimes the loudest conversations are the ones that never happen. Evening came, and finally it broke. We need to talk, one of them said. I nodded, calm. Expected, because I knew this moment was coming. We sat down, same table, same place where everything had shifted, but this time, the energy was different. Not careless, not dismissive, but serious. What you said yesterday, they began, and I listened, not to respond but to understand, because there's a difference. They tried to explain, to justify, to soften things. We didn't know. We didn't realize. We thought. And I let them speak. Because sometimes, people need to hear themselves. They need to sit with their own words, their own assumptions, their own behavior. And when they finished, I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just said one thing. You didn't know because you never asked. Silence. Immediate. Heavy. Because that sentence, it removes excuses. It brings everything back to one truth: choice. They chose not to ask, they chose not to see, they chose not to value. And now they were facing the result of that. We can fix this, one of them said. And for a moment I paused. Not because I believed it, but because I needed to be honest with myself. Because here's something important: just because someone wants to fix things, doesn't mean you're required to stay. I looked at them. Really. Looked. And I realized something: they weren't used to this version of me. The calm one, the clear one, the one who wasn't trying to hold everything together. And that made them uncomfortable, because when you change, you force others to face themselves, and not everyone is ready for that. I'm not trying to fix anything, I said calmly. I'm just changing my position in it. That sentence, it shifts everything, because it's not about the situation anymore. It's about you, your role, your boundaries, your worth. What does that mean? They asked. And this time I didn't hesitate. It means I'm not going back to how things were. Clear, simple, final. And you could feel it. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't emotional. This was permanent. We'll help with the bills, they said quickly. We'll contribute. And maybe they meant it. Maybe they didn't. But that wasn't the point anymore. Because once you've been pushed far enough, you don't just want change, you want distance, space, freedom. I appreciate that, I said. But my decision isn't based on what you'll do now. I paused. Let it land. It's based on what I've experienced for years. Silence again, because that's something people can't argue with: your experience, your truth. And that's when they realized, this wasn't about money. It wasn't about bills. It wasn't about contribution. It was about respect. And once respect is broken, it takes more than words to rebuild it. I'm leaving, I said. And this time it felt even more real, because now, it wasn't just a possibility. It was a direction. When? They asked. Soon, I replied. No exact date, no detailed plan. Because I didn't need to explain everything. I just needed to act. And that's the difference. Talking changes nothing. Action changes everything. The conversation ended quietly, no shouting, no drama. Just acceptance. And that's when I knew. This chapter was already over, they just hadn't fully realized it yet. That night, I started packing. Not everything at once. Just small things, personal things, important things, because leaving, it's not just physical, it's emotional. You slowly detach. You slowly release. You slowly let go. And with every item I packed, I felt lighter, stronger, clearer. Because I wasn't just packing my belongings, that I was reclaiming myself, the version of me that I had lost along the way. And as I stood there, looking at what was left, I realized something powerful, that I wasn't losing a home, that I was leaving a place that stopped feeling like one a long time ago. And that changes everything, because when something is no longer home, staying there only hurts you more. So if you're listening right now, and you're holding on to something that doesn't feel right anymore, ask yourself this: are you staying because it's right? Or because it's familiar? Because familiarity, it can trap you. It can keep you in places that no longer serve you. But growth requires movement. It requires courage. It requires letting go. And that's exactly what I was doing, step by step, day by day. And what happened next? The moment I finally walked out, the moment everything became real, it wasn't what anyone expected. Not them. Not even me. But it changed my life in ways I can't even explain. So stay with me, because in the next part you're going to see what happens when you finally let go of everything that was holding you back and step into a life that is truly your own. The suitcase didn't feel heavy. And that's how I knew I was ready. Because when you're carrying doubt, fear, guilt, everything feels heavy. But when you're carrying clarity, even the heaviest decisions feel light. I stood in the middle of that room one last time. The same room that had held my silence for years. The same walls that watched me shrink day after day. And now they were watching me leave. Not broken, not angry, but transformed. Have you ever had a moment like that, where you look around and realize this place no longer fits the person you've become? That's what this was. Not an escape. A transition. I zipped the suitcase slowly, took a deep breath, and walked out. No announcement, no drama. Just footsteps. Finally choosing a different direction. As I stepped into the hallway, I noticed something. Everything looked the same, but it felt different, because I was different. And when you change, your entire world shifts. Even if nothing around you does. I walked toward the door. And for a second, just 1 second, my hand paused on the handle, not because I wanted to stay, but because I was acknowledging something. This chapter, it was over. Fully, completely. And sometimes you need to pause, not to go back, but to honor how far you've come. I opened the door, stepped outside. And the air felt different, lighter, fresher, free. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't just leaving a house. I was leaving a version of myself behind. The one who tolerated disrespect. The one who stayed silent. The one who forgot her worth. And as the door closed behind me, so did that chapter. For good. I put the suitcase in the car, sat in the driver's seat, and just sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, eyes forward, heart steadied, no tears, no fear. Just calm, because this wasn't a reaction, this was a decision, and decisions like this, they don't come from emotion, they come from truth. I started the engine and drove. Not fast, not slow, just forward, because that's all that matters, forward. The road stretched ahead of me. Long, open, uncertain, but beautiful, because uncertainty, it's not something to fear, it's something to step into. It means there's space, room for something new, room for something better. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the unknown, I was excited by it. Hours passed, miles faded behind me, and with every mile, I felt lighter, like I was shedding layers of a life that no longer belonged to me. And somewhere along that road, a thought came to me, simple but powerful. I should have done this sooner. Not out of regret, but out of realization. Because how many of us stay too long in places that don't respect us, in relationships that drain us, in environments that make us feel small. All because we're afraid of change, afraid of being alone, afraid of starting over. But here's the truth: staying where you're not valued is far more painful than leaving and rebuilding. And I was finally living that truth. The sun began to set, the sky turning shades of orange and gold, and I pulled over for a moment, stepped out of the car, and just looked around. Open space, fresh air, silence. Real silence. Not the heavy kind. Not the uncomfortable kind, but the peaceful kind. The kind that heals you. And in that moment, I smiled. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was real. Because for the first time, I wasn't pretending that I wasn't adjusting myself to fit into someone else's world. I was creating my own. And that feeling? It's priceless. Days later, I arrived in Florida. New place. New environment. New energy. Everything felt unfamiliar. But in the best way. Because unfamiliar means growth. It means you're stepping into something new. Something different. Something that has the potential to change your life. I found a small place. Nothing extravagant. Nothing overwhelming. But peaceful. And that's what I needed. Peace. I unpacked slowly, placed my things carefully. And with every step, I felt something returning myself. The version of me that had been buried under years of giving, years of silence, years of being unseen. And now she was back, stronger, clearer, unstoppable. Days turned into weeks. And something incredible happened. I started enjoying my own company. No pressure, no expectations, no need to prove anything. Just me, living, breathing, being. And that's when I realized something deeply. You don't need a crowd to feel complete. You don't need constant validation. You don't need people who only notice you when you stop giving. All you need is alignment, peace. Self-respect. Because when you have those things, everything else becomes a choice, not a need. And that changes your entire life. One evening, I sat by the window watching the sunset, and I thought about everything that night. Those words, that decision, and I smiled again. Because what once felt like pain had become power. What once felt like rejection had become redirection. And what once felt like an ending had become a beginning. And that's life. It doesn't always give you what you want. But it always gives you what you need to grow. Evolve. Become who you're meant to be. So if you're listening right now, and you're afraid to leave something behind, ask yourself this: is it really serving you? Or are you just used to it? Because there's a difference. A big one. And your future depends on that answer, because staying comfortable can cost you your happiness. But choosing growth, it gives you everything. And what happened next? The call I received. The moment everything came full circle, it wasn't something I expected. Not at all. But it showed me one final truth that I want you to hear. So stay with me, because in the final part, everything connects. Everything makes sense. And you'll see exactly what happens when you finally choose yourself without looking back. It was a quiet evening. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty. It feels earned. I was sitting by the window watching the sky slowly turn gold, then orange, then deep blue. No noise, no pressure, no expectations, just peace. And for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anything. Not a thank you. Not an apology, not recognition. Because I had already given myself something far more important: closure. But life has a way of testing you one more time, just to see if you've really changed. My phone rang. I looked at the screen, their name. For a moment, just one moment, the past tried to step back in, memories, habits, old emotions. But I didn't rush. Because when you grow, you don't react the same way anymore. You pause. You choose, you stay in control. I let it ring once. More than answered. Hello. My voice was calm, steady, different. And they felt it. You can always tell when someone realizes you're not the same person anymore. We've been trying to reach you, they said. Their tone wasn't the same. No arrogance, no carelessness, just something softer, something uncertain. I've been busy, I replied. And it was true. Not just physically but mentally. Emotionally. I had been building a life that didn't revolve around them. We talked about everything, they continued. And we didn't realize how much you were doing. I listened silently, because sometimes people need to hear themselves say it. They need to feel the weight of their own words. We were wrong, they added. And there it was, the thing most people wait for. The apology, the recognition, the validation. And for a moment, I just let it sit there. Because here's the truth, sometimes by the time people realize your value, you've already moved on. Not out of anger, but out of growth. I hear you, I said calmly. Not cold. Not emotional. Just clear. We want you to come back, they said. And we'll do things differently this time. That sentence, it used to be everything I wanted. Everything I hoped for. Everything I waited years to hear. But now, it felt different. Because I wasn't the same person anymore. And that's the part people don't understand. They think an apology resets everything. They think change can erase the past. But growth, it moves forward. It doesn't go back. I stood up, walked slowly toward the window, looked outside, and took a deep breath. Because this moment, it mattered. Not because of them, but because of me. This was the test, the final one. Things will be different, they repeated, and I believed them, maybe not completely, but enough to know they meant it. But belief is not the same as alignment, and I had learned that the hard way. I'm glad you see things differently now, I said. And I meant it, because growth in others is still something to appreciate, even if it comes late. But I've changed too, I continued, and there was a pause. Because that's the part people don't expect. They think your story stayed the same, while they were figuring theirs out. What do you mean? They asked, and I smiled softly. I mean, I'm not the same person who left. Silence. Deep. Real, because those words, they carry distance. Not physical but emotional. I've built something new here, I said. Something peaceful. Something that doesn't make me question my worth. And that's when it became clear. Not just to them but to me, there was no going back. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't need to. You don't want to come back? They asked. And this time my answer didn't take time. No simple calm final but not harsh, because walking away doesn't require anger. It requires clarity. I wish things had been different, I added. And I truly hope you grow from this. Because that's the truth, you can leave people and still wish them well. That's real strength. Not bitterness. Not revenge. Just peace. We stayed on the call for a few more seconds. Nothing left to say because everything had already been said. Take care, they finally said. You too, I replied. And then, I ended the call. Not dramatically, not emotionally, just intentionally. I put the phone down, walked back to the chair, and Saturday quietly. And in that moment, I felt something powerful. Not relief, not happiness, but certainty, the kind of certainty that comes from knowing you made the right choice. Not the easy choice, not the comfortable choice, but the right one. And that changes everything. I looked around my space.my new life.my peace. And I realized something deeply, that I didn't lose anything, that I gained everything. My voice, my boundaries, my self-respect, my freedom. Because sometimes what feels like loss is actually your greatest gain. Weeks turned into months, and life continued to grow. Not perfectly, but intentionally. I met new people. Different people. People who didn't need to be convinced to respect me. People who valued my presence, without me having to prove anything. And that's when it truly hit me. You don't find better by begging for it, you find better by becoming better. And refusing to settle, that's the shift, that's the transformation. That's the power of choosing yourself. So if you're listening right now, and you're holding on to something that's slowly breaking you, hear this clearly. You don't need permission to leave. You don't need validation to choose yourself. You don't need anyone to finally see your worth, for it to be real. Because your value, it exists with or without their recognition. And the moment you understand that, your entire life changes. So don't wait, don't stay where you're tolerated. Don't keep proving your worth to people who refuse to see it. Walk away, grow, rebuild, and create a life that reflects who you truly are. Because you deserve that. You deserve peace. You deserve respect. You deserve a life where you don't have to shrink to fit in. And never forget this, the moment you choose yourself is the moment everything begins to align. So make that choice. Today. Right now, not tomorrow. Not someday, now, because your future, it's waiting on the other side of that decision. And if this story touched your heart, if you felt even one moment of truth in it, don't ignore it. That feeling, it's your sign. Backhand index pointing right. Make sure you like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe for more powerful real-life stories that inspire, heal, and transform. Because sometimes one story, one moment, one decision can change your entire life. And maybe this was yours. Stay strong, stay aware, and always choose yourself.